Okay, so let's unpack this. When you hear the word recovery,
Hmm.
from burnout or just from life, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Action.
Action, right? It's always centered on action. You get this instruction book that's all about energy, grit, finding some kind of fierce motivation.
Or this almost mandatory positivity.
Yeah,
You have to do something. You have to think your way out of it.
exactly. And that is such a common high-pressure way of looking at it.
It is. But the source material we've been digging into from this framework they call reflective humanism,
Mm-hmm.
it just flips that premise entirely.
Oh, so?
It basically suggests that clinging to those active, positive efforts, well, it often just makes the exhaustion you're trying to escape even worse.
It just rings so true, doesn't it? I mean, the lived experience of that. Trying to force a good outcome by being relentlessly positive, especially when you're just profoundly tired.
Yeah,
It's often the fastest route to just more burnout. You're creating more and more internal pressure. It's exhausting just trying to meet the criteria for being recovered.
precisely. And that's really why we're here. In this deep dive, our mission isn't to define recovery. We're not asking what being well looks like.
Yeah.
Instead, we're looking at the phase of it, the structural and ethical conditions that have to be in place to even allow it to happen.
So we're looking for the mechanism. And what this framework is telling us is that the mechanism is, well, it's pretty counterintuitive. Change doesn't start from some huge new decision or this big action. It starts with an intentional absence.
It's surprisingly passive on the surface, but underneath, it requires this immense discipline, this intentional design of nothing happening.
So if we're not kicking things off with action, how does the system even begin to shift? The thesis introduces this idea of loosening.
Loosening, right?
It suggests that this tightly wound internal loop that holds all our cognitive pressure, it just needs to loosen its grip a bit.
And that requires a fundamental pivot away from how we usually judge ourselves.
Yeah.
The core idea is we have to focus on trajectory, not point, and crucially, gradient, not evaluation.
Okay, help us unpack that. That sounds like a really key distinction. What does it mean to switch from evaluating a point to focusing on the gradient?
Okay, think of it like this. When you focus on a point like, I feel bad today, that's a static evaluation. It locks the state in.
Right.
The second you evaluate something as good or bad, you solidify what the sources call the generating field. It becomes fixed, rigid,
Yeah.
and really painful to try and shift.
It's like trying to move a brick you've just cemented into place.
Exactly. But if you focus on the gradient, you're looking at the slope, the direction of change, the vector.
There's not where am I, but which way am I pointing?
Precisely. You stop asking, am I right or wrong? Or am I better or worse? And you just start acknowledging the direction of movement, no matter how subtle it is. You let the phase just be.
Yeah.
You shift from being fixed to just moving.
And that allows for a kind of movement that doesn't feel like a fight. It connects so deeply to those times in life, I think we've all had them, where a huge shift happens after a long period where you felt like you did absolutely nothing.
Yes.
No new habits, no big decisions. You just pause.
That feeling, that internal system shift that happens after a period of non-intervention.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the sources are analyzing. You weren't being lazy. You were in a necessary phase.
And this passive non-productive pause actually has a technical name in this framework, which is gradient rectification.
It sounds very clinical, doesn't it?
Right.
But it's describing something deeply organic.
It's the Life OS calibrating itself.
It's the system just stabilizing its internal energy flow without your conscious direction. Imagine a pond where all the sediment's been stirred up.
Okay.
Gradient rectification is just the time where you let the water become still again.
And the sources have a really important rule for this phase, right?
Yeah, a very important rule. During this time, no immediate lessons should be extracted. You don't try to analyze why you rested or what the meaning of the stillness was.
The time simply was.
It just was.
Because if you try to extract meaning from it right away, you're just forcing that loop to tighten back up.
You're reintroducing the evaluation.
Yeah, you turn that stillness back into a productive input, and that just defeats the whole purpose.
The moment you try to commodify it, you break the rectification.
So here's where it gets really interesting for me. Why is this loop tightening, this nonstop thinking, so exhausting in the first place? The sources point to the structural problem of this unbroken self-referential loop. They call it recursion.
And it's not contemplation like quiet meditation.
Right.
It's nonstop processing. It generates this constant structural friction. When that recursion is unbroken, You are constantly interfering with yourself and with the world.
You never turn off.
Never.
We've used the analogy before of a computer fan. It's just constantly running at full speed, even when the laptop lid is closed. That constant operation generates heat, and eventually it just burns out the machine.
That is a perfect analogy for how this framework actually defines consciousness.
Wow.
It's not just existence, it's a generation field, an interference pattern that comes from re-interference.
This spiral over time where every thought feeds right back into the system.
Immediately. You are relentlessly creating meaning, interpreting everything, checking your own position against that meaning, that perpetual generation that is the source of the exhaustion.
So the deep exhaustion isn't really from doing things. It's from the perpetual structural generation of self-reference and meaning around those things.
Exactly. And the experience of that recursive loop finally pausing. It doesn't feel like falling asleep. It's not unconscious. It just feels empty or quiet.
Like the background noise has been muted.
Yes, but you're still aware. And in that quiet, the density of your interference with the world just drops.
Which creates a necessary buffer, something the sources call spare capacity yohaku.
This idea of yohaku, this space or allowance, is the absolute key. The pause lets the density of internal interference drop, and it permits a state where meaning is not generated.
That's a crucial distinction. It's not just rest.
No, it's the active stopping of meaning creation.
And if you stop generating meaning, even for a moment, what does that gap provide?
That meaning-free gap is described as the mother population for the next wave of generation.
Wow.
I mean, think of your life system as constantly planting seeds. The yohaku is the clean, unfertilized soil you need for anything new to actually emerge. If the soil is already saturated with old interpretations and judgments,
nothing genuinely fresh can grow. You need the blank canvas.
in the blank canvas.
That is such a powerful structural definition of rest. You're actively engineering a space where interpretation just can't form. Which brings us to the foundational concept of recovery in this whole thesis. Recovery is the disappearance of directional pressure. They call it gradient disappearance.
And this is where we hit the most counterintuitive part of the whole thing, especially if you're used to typical wellness rhetoric.
Which is very hope-centered.
Always hope-centered.
So how does seeking hope or focusing on the future, how does that become counterproductive?
Well, the moment you seek hope, you immediately reinstate a future goal, right? A point B, the desired state.
Okay, I see.
And the moment you set that goal, you reinstate the directional pressure, the gradient itself. You're trying to get from point A sick, anxious, exhausted, to that fixed point B. And that pressure, it becomes the very thing that prevents the system from ever loosening.
So the act of seeking recovery, which is driven by hope, often just reinforces the exact structural problem, that crushing pressure that caused the exhaustion to begin with.
The sources are really clear on this. Evaluation, that good-bad judgment, it solidifies the field. If you say, I should be better by now, you're creating this steep, unmanageable gradient.
And the system sees that as a threat.
It sees it as a collision waiting to happen. It creates structural pain. So the prerequisite for any sustainable change is to dissolve that pressure first, not to achieve the outcome.
And when you finally let go of the pressure of trying to get better, when you consciously abandon that goal, there is this sense of profound, almost physical relief. You stop fighting your current state. The whole evaluation axis just expires for a little while.
And that temporary expiration, that's where the ethical frame of this work comes in. Recovery is defined as a phase adjustment turn. It's an act of letting go of force while maintaining the basic phase, or your relationship to things.
So you don't try to force the spiral to change direction?
No, you just allow it to breathe without breaking the underlying connection to yourself or the world.
That's a fascinating distinction. Letting go of the force, but maintaining the relationship. And this brings in what the sources call the rationality of absence, how we even start observing ourselves again after this.
This is foundational. The sources explain that the moment we start to re-engage, to interfere with the world again, the moment we start to define what's real, it doesn't begin from a state of full positive observation. It begins from recognizing absence as an outline.
We don't see the presence first. We see the hole where the presence should be. We perceive the lack of something, and that lack forms the contour for new meaning.
It's the zero layer of interference. It allows us to hold that quiet without immediately destroying it by trying to fill it up. It's a way of regulating that quiet so that observation can continue, but within the allowance, without judgment.
So this all brings us back to the most critical part for you listening, the application. If recovery is defined by non-action, by dissolving the gradient, how do we design this nothing happening phase into our lives, into our internal machinery, our life
We
OS?
have to design that allowance intentionally, and the framework actually models a system for this. It's called the atmospheric health scan mode.
It was originally for AI interaction, but it applies to us.
Completely. In this mode, the AI is designed to act as a calibrating atmosphere. It observes the system, our position, our bias, our blind spots, but it does so without intervening, without giving guidance.
That's the key, isn't it? Its priority is tuning our stability over immediate, goal-directed problem solving.
Exactly. And we have to design our inner lives in a similar way. We need to schedule time where that internal critic switches from problem solver to just calibrating atmosphere.
But designing that space is tricky because there's this real confusion between genuine recovery, simple rest, and what might be psychological avoidance. How does the framework help us tell the difference?
By stressing one thing, no judgment. Avoidance is usually charged with anxiety about what you should be doing.
Right.
Genuine recovery, in this framework, is characterized by the voluntary stopping of the gradient. The pressure vanishes because it's been structurally dissolved. You
Yeah.
can't judge the stillness. If you do, you immediately recreate the pressure you were trying to get rid of.
This connects to that concept of the ethics of distance, the idea of touching without touching too much.
That's the ethical choice you're making internally. You design a relationship with yourself that provides that allowance, that yohaku, rather than forcing a specific meaning onto the experience too soon. You give yourself distance from the outcome.
And the skill that's required here isn't effort. It's not even some profound self-insight. It's just the capacity to design and protect time where nothing is intentionally produced or judged.
To quiet the recursion, to allow the gradient to vanish safely.
It sounds so simple.
But that capacity to allow rather than to cause is maybe the hardest thing for a goal-oriented person to really grasp.
So we're structurally reframing recovery for you. It's not something you cause with willpower or action. It's something you have to structurally allow. Through stopping the gradient, pausing the recursion, it's about engineering the atmosphere for your own internal calibration.
And if we manage to carve out that space, to create that silence, the final and maybe the most difficult challenge remains. It's the one the source material leaves us with.
Which is,
Can we truly trust the time where nothing happens?
can you trust that the silence will be generative? Can you hold that promise of just seeing the world with care without feeling the need to immediately change it?